When we look at today's Russia, it almost feels like we've seen this before. History is repeating itself, loud and clear. Because the problems Russia faces now are eerily similar to those that once swallowed the Soviet Union whole. The economy is gasping for air. The war has blood it dry. Every ounce of national strength poured into the front lines. Factories, budgets, resources, all chained to one single goal: survive the fight. But survival always comes at a cost. And right now, that cost is everything else: growth, stability, even the illusion of unity. Let's be honest, beneath the surface, Russia isn't as solid as it seems. Yes, Chechnya and other regions appear obedient. But that's a performance. It's a loyalty bought by power, not belief. And power, when concentrated in one man's hands, no matter how strong he looks, is fragile. Vladimir Putin has built a system that looks stable from afar. Centralized, efficient, absolute. Here's the irony: the more control he holds, the weaker the system becomes without him. Because when one pillar carries the roof, what happens when it cracks? If Putin loses his grip, even for a moment, Russia could slide into a political vacuum. And in that void, every autonomous region, every restless faction, will start asking the same question: do we still need Moscow? That's when loyalty dissolves. That's when unity becomes illusion. That's when a nation starts to split. And if the Russian military loses the war, that's not just a battlefield defeat, it's a potential collapse of the entire regime. A political implosion, a social meltdown. A breakup that might shatter the Russian Federation itself. Now imagine the consequences of that. A post-collapse Russia, fragmented into smaller, desperate states, each with pieces of the old empire's arsenal. Yes, including nuclear weapons. It's the kind of scenario that keeps every major power awake at night. The US, China, Europe, none of them want to see those nukes scattered like confetti. Because chaos loves a vacuum. And power always moves in to fill it. Just like this, when NATO and the EU rush to absorb Poland, Romania, and others, the great powers will act fast again. Only this time, China will be ready. Back then, Beijing was too weak to step in when the Soviet Union crumbled. Now, things are different. If Russia ever truly unravels, China won't stand aside. It will move cautiously, strategically, to protect its borders and its interests. Not for conquest, but for security. Because when your neighbor's house catches fire, you don't wait until the flames reach your door. If internal conflict erupts in Russia, China's first move will likely be toward the Far East, the region around Vladivostok. Why? Because that's the most vulnerable gateway. If China doesn't move quickly, Japan or even the US might. The next focus: Outer Baikal, Irkutsk, and the vast corridors that connect to Central Asia and Siberia's energy routes. The mission wouldn't be to fight, but to stabilize. To prevent an uncontrolled spillover of violence, refugees, or extremist groups. If nuclear materials risk falling into the wrong hands, China could even deploy special forces or airstrikes to neutralize the threat. In such extreme conditions, even coordination with the US wouldn't be off the table. Because sometimes, rivals have to cooperate when chaos threatens them both. So, when we talk about China sending troops, it's not about helping Russia or seizing land. It's about preventing disaster. A preventive move, not an aggressive one. And that's crucial to understand. China today doesn't play the old imperial game. It's not chasing territory. Its military steps, if any, would be defensive, meant to secure stability, not redraw borders. Only if Russia completely collapses, utterly, irreversibly. If Vladivostok turns into a lawless hub of crime and warlords. Or if another power tries to forcibly occupy the Far East. Would China even consider integration or governance of the area? Even then, it wouldn't be through conquest. It would require local consent, genuine, not coerced, a stark contrast to the referendums we've seen elsewhere. Now let's zoom out. We've talked about three main states of Russia and how they each affect China. First, the Russia of today, unified, authoritarian, but still cooperative. This version poses some challenges to China: competition, mistrust, but nothing existential. Second, a unified, democratic Russia. That one, geopolitically, would be the least favorable for Beijing. A democratic Russia might align tightly with the West, shifting the power balance across Eurasia. Third, a fragmented, uncontrollable Russia. That's the nightmare scenario. Because chaos on your northern border means endless military pressure and constant instability. In such a case, China would have to pour massive resources into the north, guarding borders, securing nukes, stabilizing trade routes. But over time, chaos tends to burn itself out. As the US, Europe, and China all intervene to support their preferred factions, the chaos would gradually stabilize. Eventually, those fragments could settle into something new, a divided, yet manageable Russia. And that's the fourth model. A fractured but controllable Russia. Not unified, not democratic, but stable enough to predict and influence. That's the version that quietly benefits China the most. Because it means no powerful rival to the north. A weaker Russia, dependent on Chinese trade and investment. And open access to Siberian resources. In that world, Moscow would lose its grip over the Far East. Local regions might turn to Beijing for economic lifelines, pipelines, roads, technology, energy. Dependency would grow, influence would deepen. And slowly, a new balance would form, one where China holds quiet leverage without firing a shot. So, what happens when Russia becomes divided, but still controllable? It changes everything. For China, that's a quiet victory. The northern threat fades away, the border turns calm. And the focus can shift southward, toward the Pacific and the South China Sea. Without a strong Russia in the north, China gains flexibility. Its navy could move farther out, even into the Sea of Japan. That single step would break through the old first island chain, opening a direct path from the mainland to the northern Pacific. Think about what that means strategically. If China's navy can operate in the Sea of Japan, the US's military, currently concentrated in central and southern Japan, will have to shift north, maybe even to Hokkaido. Every move on one side forces a counter move on the other. That's the endless dance of power. And here's the interesting part. As the north grows safer for China, its southern front becomes stronger. The more secure the border, the more resources can be redirected. From guarding Russia to projecting power in the Pacific. One side rises, the other falls. That's how balance changes quietly, but dramatically. Meanwhile, energy cooperation will tilt as well. Russia, weakened and fragmented, will no longer be an equal partner. It will depend on China for trade, for technology, for survival. Pipelines, investment, and commerce will all flow one way southward. In that sense, Russia becomes not a partner, but a piece on China's chessboard. And it doesn't stop there. Diplomatically, China would gain more weight. Economically, more reach. Militarily, more space to maneuver. A divided but stable Russia would serve as a buffer. Not a rival, but a shield against chaos from the north. Of course, this is the one-sided story. There is always another edge to the blade. Without a strong Russia standing beside it, China loses a powerful partner against the United States. Even with influence in the Far East, China alone cannot yet match America's global reach. And making Russia divided but stable is easier said than done. It's a delicate act, like walking a tightrope over fire. Move too fast, and Russian nationalism explodes. Move too slow, and other powers move in first. Timing is everything. So, Beijing would have to play the long game, reacting to every shift, avoiding open conflict, and using diplomacy, trade, and quiet influence to shape the outcome. And remember, the US and China would not be passive observers. They would both plan for this moment long before it comes. When the Soviet Union fell, the world was unprepared. This time, everyone would be ready. From Washington to Beijing, contingency plans are already being imagined. If Russia falls apart, the US will aim to contain the chaos. China will aim to stabilize its borders. In doing so, both might find themselves working together and against each other at the same time. Because cooperation and competition often travel side by side. Both sides would back different groups. support different regions, and play a long geopolitical chess match across the ruins of Russia. Will Russia ever unite after that? Unlikely. Once broken, the pieces rarely fit the same way again. There is another possible path open. One that's even more complicated, more unstable, and perhaps the most realistic of all. The fifth model, a Russia that looks unified, but inside, it's already split. Picture this. Putin is gone. Moscow still claims control, but local leaders run their own shows. The military, the money, the power all divided among regions. Far East governors turn to China for aid. Western regions listen to Europe. And the Kremlin, it's still there in name only. That's a Russia unified on paper, divided in reality. A state of illusion, calm on the surface, chaos underneath. For China, that's both an opportunity and a threat. Opportunity to bind Siberia and the Far East closer through economic aid, turning them into friendly, pro-Chinese zones. Threat because nuclear weapons and instability never stay quiet for long. For the O's, it's both relief and risk. Relief because one strategic rival is gone. Risk because the vacuum invites confrontation, and the new front line might shift east toward the Pacific. For Europe, it means less fear of invasion, and more waves of refugees, and tough choices about which side to back. For Ukraine, it's safety from Russia's old aggression, but danger from scattered militants near its borders. For Central Asia, is a turning point, free at last from Moscow's shadow. These nations could redefine their identity, and many would likely lean toward Beijing or play both sides for advantage. Everyone gains something. Everyone loses something. Except Russia itself. For Russia, there is almost no light in this picture. Only loss of unity, of power, of identity. A country caught between collapse and chaos. That's the tragic irony. The most likely outcome of Russia's defeat is not full destruction, but a long, slow decay, a nation cracked but not shattered. A body that still stands, but can no longer move. Unless, and it's a big unless, a new strongman rises. Someone like Putin 30 years ago, who can force the pieces back together through sheer power. But after everything Russia has endured, will its people ever trust another man like that again? That's the question hanging in the air. And perhaps an even bigger one follows. What will be Putin's own fate? Will he quietly fade away on the coast or face judgment far from home? And where will China stand when that day comes? That's a story for another time. Thanks for watching. See you next time.